I'd like to welcome back our other speakers. Diarmaid and Ville, if you'd like to come back up to the stage. If you welcome them back to the stage, please. That would be wonderful. So we had three very good presentations. So thank you so much for that. And I'd like to take advantage of being the chair and ask a couple of questions myself. So what I think when we look at the Nordic countries, we see some really interesting leadership on climate and decarbonization. And I would like to just ask you as a panel what we can do to really shine a light on that work, and how can we encourage more international focus on some of the really impressive efforts that are being demonstrated here in Finland in particular.
I'll just speak for my own country, or for what I think of my own country. We have a ban on nuclear power, and we have a hypocritic attitude towards decarbonization, like many countries have in Europe. Unfortunately, policy in Europe is dictated very much by the German-driven EU policy, which dictates renewables. But I would like to see, and one of the reasons I came to this conference was to see what a small country like Finland with a high energy use is doing. And I do think that the Nordic countries have a lot to offer to southern countries like ourselves, or maybe isolated island countries like mine. So we really do look to the north, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. I actually just met the Speaker of the Irish Parliament, so just a few hours ago. I think it's important to distinguish when we talk about national models, regional models, for instance, how the Nordic market actually work. We just got a report from Mr. Jorma Ollila, the former CEO of Nokia and so forth, that how the Nordic market really works. And as a politician, it's easy to say that, hey, we have this Nordic market, we have European targets. But actually, when you get deeper, for instance, into the subsidy system, you realize that each and every country works on their own. When I meet the energy ministers from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, they said that, yes, we do cooperation, and yes, we agree, yes, we can. But at the end of the day, they get back to their own countries and do their own policies. Unfortunately, this is the way. How Nordic countries could pave the way, I think we do it already. And going to Germany, going to France, further down in Europe, we see that, yes, we are forerunners in many ways, but we have to work harder. We should develop this kind of Nordic Model 2.0 and really get more ambitious. And of course, we have to consider what's going on in Russia, what's going on in Baltic countries. And at the end of the day, energy is very much also foreign and security politics. We cannot ignore that fact. But I think it's also very important that we work at the Nordic level, but also European level. But as I said earlier, on platforms like this, because of course we politicians, we need people like you to tell what's going on with the technology, what Fortum does in Nordic countries and at the global level. That's very important.
Yeah, just to add that, so that in Finland we have had over many years very diverse energy portfolio. We have had hydro, nuclear, bio for many years, tens of years, and we continue to have that kind of energy portfolio in upcoming years. So that's something to tell others also.
Okay, so raise your hand if you have a question. Oh, yes, we have one there, we have two. So, it's me.
Hi, me again. Just a quick comment, perhaps. I'm thinking, I'm listening to the discussion about energy policy in general. I think we're too fixated on looking at prices of things that are really not market price in the end, because energy is a lot about politics and how the energy economy is constructed is actually politics. And as Ville just mentioned, it also has like national interest playing in there and so on. So I would like to kind of, maybe just my view, and just you can comment on it, but get rid of tables showing that how many euros per kilowatt hour and stuff like this, because it's actually really, we're measuring things that are not comparable in the end if we look at energy produced by a solar panel compared to, I don't know, nuclear reactor and so on and so on. And this is something that really dictates the talk at the moment, but it's really uninformative in the end.
Okay, so the misleading nature of levelized costs and the overall system.
Yeah, actually, I think levelized cost was developed for a regulated market, so it's perhaps not the most appropriate metric. I tend to avoid it. That's why I've used that sticker price, if you like. But I think I do accept what you're saying. You want to arrive at the value, right? Or what the real value you're delivering. Well, that's difficult. And the risk, yeah. So that's like the cost of the social cost of carbon or whatever. You could put that into it and say that, well, the price is actually, if it's 50 euros a megawatt levelized cost, and the actual price is like minus 20 to use nuclear, or if your socialized cost is higher, it's minus 150. So it's possibly a good marketing idea. But I agree on the levelized cost metric. I don't think it's useful, but it has to be seen with other metrics.
Okay, hello. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. This question relates more to Finland, and since there's a lot of international public concern about the waste management of nuclear waste, could it be possible that we would utilize our national image and brand of having the Onkalo project successfully implemented to actually take into strategy to start taking care of the international nuclear waste in Finland? Is it possible to have that in the energy strategy or in the economic strategy in the near future?
Who would like to answer?
From technical point of view, I think Posiva is already doing that. They have this company, Posiva Solutions, and they are saying that they can how their engineering expertise and selling that know-how.
Well, I thought I'm asking difficult questions from the Finnish ministers in next 30 minutes at the House of Parliament. But you started already by asking me a question that I should ask. That let's see. But I said technically speaking, yes, everything is possible. But it's very much a political question, and let's see how the world goes further.
Very good. A political question and a political answer. So I have two hands here. I'll come to you first.
Yeah, so if you look at the big picture for Finland, we could actually generate power for the whole of Europe because we have so much uranium and thorium in the bedrock, and we could actually enrich it here in Finland and just generate power so we could make export income equal to the level of Norway export income from oil. In Finland, with very climate-friendly technology. So if you look at the facts, this is what we could do, and also take all the waste and bury it here in the bedrock, and that would be completely fine. We would do a lot of good for the world, but in practical terms, what's politically possible? So I don't have such a negative view as most of the people here. So with Atte, we're working in the Helsinki City Council, and our practical aim is to introduce nuclear district heating as an option for the climate strategy of Helsinki, which is currently based on biomass and assumption that the biomass is completely emission-free. And we know that it's actually more than 200 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So in terms of practical steps, I think the district heating, which generates more than half of the emissions of all the city, including traffic and electricity and all of that. So I think that's a practical step which is easy to argue and actually. So we can think of the big picture too, but let's not just think of the waste. Let's just think of the potential for emission-free electricity generation in Finland. Thanks.
Great comment there. So I have a question here, and then I'll come to you, Eric. So yeah, we mustn't forget about the emissions as the waste getting pumped straight into the sky.
Riku Merikoski, SK Market Predictor. I would, this is again a bit Finnish question, but let's say you from Ireland can also try to answer for some of your industrial sites. How do you think, could you see a possibility in some day in the future? Well, Finland has 3 big emission sources in a way, like in one place, one of is this Helsinki area, which burns quite a lot of fossil fuels. Then we have a big refinery in Porvoo and a big steel factory in Raahe. One or many of these actually have to be decarbonized in quite soon, actually, if we are really going to be a decarbonized society. So for the Finnish people here, I would like to ask, do you believe that the Finnish state would be ready to provide financial support to decarbonize one or many of these sites in the future? Because that is the question we really have to ask from us if we want to see a decarbonized society. We have to think about single sites, because that's where the problem is.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, should we take? Yeah, let's take some answers and then take a lot.
I think that's a very good question, and as you know, here in Finland, it's a big discussion going on that how taxpayers' money is being used as far as the state subsidies for industries. We're talking about billions of euros just in Finland. I think, yes, we can develop the system, but then we have to develop the whole system. It could be more like contractual-based model, that if state gives €1, we get something back. So I would like to see, having a background in business law, that we make deals with the industry that, okay, we provide something, but you provide something as far as making the processes and system more towards renewables, whatever it is.
Just my comment. We could do it in a similar way, like Denmark has done with its offshore wind farms. We pay someone some money and they provide the service.
For instance, yes.
So my question is now, do you see it would be possible someday?
We have a parliamentary group now starting, and we're working on this proposal. Again, a political answer.
Yeah. I mean, actually, this if we broaden this question out, really, it's about designing models to enable investor confidence, investor certainty, creating a role for. There's a role for government to play in that, in providing, you know, the right political environment, as well as other incentives that are within the government's gift. And of course, then, you know, understanding the customer perspective. You know, what is it that the utilities need in order for them to feel that, you know, they can take on that technology and ultimately operate it in our societies. So I have another question.
I just wondered, it's great having this conversation here about the role of nuclear. What's your view and advice how to ensure that nuclear debate is having at a regional level, for example, within EU, and having the right policy in place, and at international level?
Well, I think politics does matter. After German elections, what's going on in France? What is the political stability between so-called traditional parties, green parties? We really have to have. I'm traveling to Brussels tonight for tomorrow, just to have a discussion about the German situation, things in France, and. Of course, it's hard to forecast, what's going on. But I think that the best thing we can do as Finns, as European Union, is to work with the facts and how we foresee the future.
Dermot, did you want to comment a bit more on the finance models and investor certainty?
In what sense?
In the sense of, the question that we had was, how do we fund getting this new infrastructure built?
Yeah, I think it's. I think it's a very good question. I think the spend at the moment on renewables, for example, it's trumpeted. I think it's around 200 or 300 million, millions or billions, billions a year, right? Whereas we've been told by the UN that we need to be spending about 1.5 trillion a year to decarbonize to sort out decarbonization. I tend to look at things from a sort of meta-analysis, from bird's eye view, and that sort of money that would buy you, even at inflated prices, that's buying you 150 reactors a year. That's going to solve a lot of your problem in 10 15 years at 1.5 trillion. I think that's probably about 2% of world GDP. So I think at a European level, things like these sort of figures matter, because the EU is going to look at its capability as a group, as a bloc, and there are various forces pulling it in all directions.
I think from taxpayers' point of view, it's important that to distinguish whether we subsidize the production, whether we subsidize the investment. I think that's the one fundamental question. And this is, for instance, something what we talk at the Economic Committee here in Finland, after giving 1.4 billion euros to wind production, for instance.
Very good. So as part of investor certainty, or creating investor certainty, one issue that we've identified as a strategic need for the advanced reactor sector is some kind of regulatory harmonization, because once these technologies are demonstrated, getting close to commercialization, and they've demonstrated a safety case in a country, what they don't want to do is to have to go back to, a clean sheet of paper to start again in every country that they want to build their product in, because they need access to global markets in order to really make their business case. So could we talk a bit about some of the potential pathways for that regulatory harmonization that we might explore?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting issue and has to be handled some way. And it's just cooperation between utilities and cooperation between regulators. And that's where to start that process.
Harmonization is a nice word, integration is a nice word, but let's think about Nordic countries. We have been together for a long time, we share the same values and same type of thinking about the welfare society, and we're very proud of that. But still we haven't been able to harmonize this particular issue. So taking this to the European level and even further to global level, the question is that what kind of politicians we have? Do we have a common, do we share the common values? Are we ready to commit ourselves for this kind of harmonization? And I think this is one of the key topics in Europe, and look just what's going on now.
No, I'd agree with what Vali says there, what kind of politicians we have, because I see the politicians in Europe as being more functionaries than real politicians. I don't see them as leaders. They're appointees, and I don't see any leadership coming from the EU as a bloc on this thing. So that's a bit off topic. I know you wanted to look at regulatory harmonization, but I can hardly pronounce that word.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment about that topic.
Can I have something quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, that won't be easy, but I think just to remember that airplane industry has done it already.
Yeah, so I want to make a comment about that, which is that I appreciate all your answers from a national perspective. I think part of the challenge, so Kirsty and I are actually involved in a project to explore this and develop models for this. So one of the things we're finding is that if you, and the airline industry is an interesting one, shipping is also an interesting one. Shipping is interesting because in shipping there's a private process to create standards and classifications, and then those are adopted by national regulators. And part of the problem when you go to a bunch of national regulators and you say, how would you like to give up your sovereignty to allow people to build nuclear products which they can then deliver to your country? It's not a question that most people give you a positive answer to. And that's usually the way this is framed. It's framed as, please give up some of your control so that the nuclear industry can have a bigger market. And that's not going to work. But finding a way to create a product-based, privately driven set of standards which meet the requirements of all regulators, this is a very different kind of question to ask, and I believe a much more productive way to approach the problem. And it would be great if Finland could get involved in this. We have a working group that we've put together that includes the US and the UK and Canada and some other countries are observers. Korea and China are interested. And I think Finland would be a very interesting participant in this group. And the goal is not to reduce the sovereignty of the regulators. The goal is to decide how an international product-based certification process could be applied to nuclear power plant products, and then make sure that the concerns and interests of these regulators who would be part of this market are being met by that classification. So I think it's an easier question to answer positively.
Just add to that, I agree. I think this is a political will rather than a technical issue, and I think potentially a harmonised regulation doesn't necessarily mean giving up sovereignty. Take an example within EU for rail sector. So in I think perhaps 15 years ago, there's interoperability regulation. So EU decided that want to harmonise the regulation for high-speed rail. So, and it mandated that across. Still, that is implemented at national level, but it's just harmonisation regarding that. So, and within the EU, there's a mechanism for nuclear regulation to be harmonised with the EU Safety Directive. But again, it's just the implementation of that.
Thank you, Kay. So, would anyone like to respond, or should we take a...
Thank you for your comments. I really appreciate. That's what I'm here for. So I think that's a good starting point. And don't get me wrong, what I just said. I just try to be pragmatic. What's going on in Europe, but I think we can find a balance. And once we build up that kind of platforms, the politicians like me will listen.
I have a financing question. Global development banks won't finance nuclear projects in developing nations. So, be it the World Bank or recently I was involved with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, drafting an energy policy and stipulating that it's essentially focused on renewables. We will finance coal or gas if there's a reliability imperative, which means they will finance coal and gas, and nuclear is just absolutely excluded. Same as Rowley said at the very beginning, it's just left out. And so we took that up as a submission. I spoke with the country director in Australia about that to get some idea of what that process is, and it's a purely political process. And in a way, I think our countries are all hurting ourselves because there's huge markets there for potentially scaling these technologies, but they can't borrow. They can't borrow to get it done. And our countries have representatives sitting on the boards and sitting in these groups, these decision-making groups that fund these banks. And they don't offer money. They don't offer low-cost finance for nuclear projects. It would seem to me that as well as looking within our own borders, we have to attend to our responsibilities through the institutions that we operate. Because that might actually be where a lot of that scaling comes from. I mean, there's plenty of demand there to build, but if it's cheaper to build coal than nuclear, we know what they'll do, they'll build coal. Can we do more there? I mean, can we start questioning those policies? They seem to have been hardwired into these institutions for a few decades now, and no one's really stopped to interrogate the justification behind those policies. Can we do more there?
Yeah, I think you're right, Ben. We have to do more. I mean, if you look at Africa, it's going to go from 1.2 billion to... It's the biggest growth sector population-wise, and they're going to need shed loads of energy. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is countries like Africa, or individual countries within Africa, or developing countries. And they've been denied access to finance for this key part of infrastructure. So I think we have to call out these politicians or the institutions as hypocritical. They're definitely not doing the moral thing, but there's an inertia there. It's huge inertia. I know at my level that in my country, objected to the Hinkley Point power plant in conjunction with Austria, because they took a legal challenge. And it is impossible to go and talk to the bureaucrats who are driving that kind of process. They're not represented or responsible to the people on issues like that. So it's institutional inertia, I'd describe it as.
It is. I would agree with that. I mean, Ben, I picked that up on my side of the world in the UK, and also started asking the question in our treasury and in large financial institutions about their position on including nuclear in their low carbon investment portfolios. And it firstly doesn't seem to have just occurred to them. Nobody's asked them that question before. So the first thing that we can do is actually to start the conversation and understand if there are concerns, what those are, and then work harder to address them.
And I do wonder whether maybe advanced nuclear might be a useful stepping in point for them. Sorry. And I have wondered on this topic whether the family of advanced nuclear technologies that have been in discussion here today might be the useful stepping off point for them to make a consideration like that. Well, we don't wish to be going down this road of these types of projects. However, here we can delineate things with a set of characteristics, and that would be, even if technically we're splitting hairs on the improvement of safety or whatever else, maybe just politically that makes it a smoother road. It gives them something to step onto that's new and that's different. But you have to ask. I think a lot of them genuinely didn't know.
So, would you tell us a bit more about the Finnish model? You're very successfully building, new nuclear in Europe, which is something to admire. I know there's obviously been issues, as we're also having in with Hinkley Point with EDF Energy, but that's getting along, moving along now. But your other plant, the Fennovoima plant, appears to be financially, really solid. I actually asked the chief executive of Fennovoima how it was so cheap, and he said, "How is it so expensive in the UK?"
Well, I think what I can say about Fennovoima is that the Finnish parliament, the majority of the MPs said yes to the project. And I also represent one of the owners, which is a regional energy company, Lahti Energy, from the other side. So, of course, I follow the project closely. But also, of course, as I mentioned, the political climate and, of course, how the previous projects have gone further. So it's not easy to have a political discussion these days about nuclear, let's be honest. But what I could also say that one point about the finance you raised. That, for instance, tomorrow in Brussels, we have many strategic financing elements on table. How we make the future. Finland will be the chair of European Union in 2 years, 2019. And therefore, I think Finland can really pave the way for certain things. But I think the most important thing is that the cities like Helsinki make certain applications here, and we need references. We need something that people, they can touch, they can see, they can feel. And by doing that, yes, we can end up in a situation that we have new alternatives.
Yes, I could just comment on that the goal of making Helsinki district heating nuclear and reducing the emissions greatly is not just about Helsinki. It's really to pave the way, to show the way for other countries in Europe to do the same and globally. So we just need one city. We just need one city to do this properly and show it's possible, it's cost efficient, it reduces the emissions more than half, and basically that's what we need to be the seed of the change in the world. So that's the goal of the project.
For doing that, yeah. So, so I know we may just pause the discussion briefly because I know that you unfortunately have to leave a little early. So, I don't want to make you late for Parliament because you have important work to do. But we really appreciate the time that you've taken to come and meet with us today, and for all of the work that you're doing out there representing this important issue. So could you please thank our speakers?
Thank you very much. In regards to London and Birmingham, and actually I left my teeth to that rink when I played there 96, 97, I was beaten up by one of the goons from North America. So thank you very much.
Sorry.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Great conversation. You've got a hard time there.
Okay, so we thought to give you a little bit of extra time since we've been squeezing from the break so much today. So we thought that we should give you a little bit of extra time to go through today's, all the presentations, all today's ideas in discussions following these excellent presentations and discussions. So on my behalf, I thank you very, very much for being such great followers and participants to our very interesting discussions. I think the sort of discussion about advanced nuclear is only about to start, and I think all this sort of work that everyone involved has put into this, and especially Rauli, I think it will push the very important issue further ahead. And before I let you leave, I would like to thank all like you to join me in thanking all the participants, and especially thanking Mr. Rauli Partanen for his excellent job in organizing the whole event. Oh?
Yeah, please. I would like to say here, on behalf of myself as a board member of World Energy Council, Laura, you have done an excellent job running this business here during some years, and you have changed the mode we had. We have been fast. We have become open. We have started looking at international matters. You have been a driving motor, and I want to thank you for these years and wish you all the best for the coming years in Finnuclear, which is a great place for you. Welcome there also. Thank you, Lauri.
Thank you. Well, that wasn't planned. You can probably judge it from the sort of confused face I've got right now. But anyway, thank you, everybody.
please mingle, talk with each other, have fun. Winter's coming.